This staircase is a Thomasson, and so is this door. And this fence too is a Thomasson. Thomassons are completely ordinary architectural elements that we encounter dozens of times in our daily lives. They are so commonplace that they blend perfectly into the urban landscape, hiding in plain sight. On the one hand, they are everyday objects. On the other, they are a true curiosity because they defy the regime of utility. Thomassons exist, but they are utterly useless. Stairs and ladders that lead to walls or simply stop abruptly, bricked up windows still marked by their sills, doors that open from the first or second floor into thin air, fences that can simply be walked around. The Japanese architect, urbanist, and artist Genpai Akasegawa can be considered the discoverer of Thomassons. Akasegawa writes that in 1972 he consciously noticed a Thomasson for the first time, in Yotsuya, a district of Tokyo. While walking with two colleagues, he noticed a peculiar staircase on the side of a building that led up and then back down again. What exactly was it there for? Akasegawa asked later on. Normally staircases like these have entrances at the top, a door through which one enters a building, but this one didn't. It had a window, but who would build a staircase just to get to a window? After two further discoveries, a boarded-up ticket booth and a bricked-up gate, Akasegawa and the study group he led began to develop a theory. They believed that these useless objects, which are embedded and integrated into the urban world despite their lack of function, and in some cases are even maintained, represent a form of art. Although even the term art doesn't quite do this phenomenon justice. Rather, it is a matter of hyper-art. Akasegawa's reasoning? Art is something an artist sets out to make, but hyper-art is something a hyper-artist makes unconsciously, without any idea that they are doing so. A work of hyper-art can have an assistant, but not a creator. In the end, all hyper-art has is the person who discovers it. This hyper-art actually comes into the world by chance. It is not the result of planning or artistic creation. The Thomassons owe their peculiar name to the American baseball player Gary Thomasson. From 1972 to 1980, he played in the Major League Baseball in the United States. But then he was signed by the Yomiuri Giants, a Japanese baseball team. During his 2 seasons in Japan, Thomasson was a complete disappointment. He barely hit the ball and eventually spent most of his time on the bench. Akasegawa put it like this: he had a fully formed body and yet served no purpose to the world, and the Giants were still paying a mint to keep him there. Seriously, I can't think of any way to describe Gary Thomasson but as living hyper-art. The discovery of Thomassons has inspired countless people around the world since the 1980s to photograph, collect, and preserve these now useless architectural elements for future generations. And that is important because, as Akasegawa himself warns, the existence of Thomassons is precarious. They are only allowed to remain as long as their removal is too uneconomical or too expensive. But if something is completely demolished or structurally altered, Thomassons are irreversibly destroyed. They are not protected as historical monuments. Thomassons may appear to be mere curiosities, amusing to look at, but ultimately just a quirky obsession of art and architecture enthusiasts. But Akasegawa's interpretation of his discoveries as hyper-art is only one of several. Thomassons not only have an aesthetic dimension, but also a theoretical one. As a student, Genpai Akasegawa was strongly influenced by Wajiro Kon, an architect and professor considered the founder of so-called Modernology. As early as the 1920s, Kohn focused his attention on everyday objects: how people dress, what tools they use, how they groom themselves. He observed urban Tokyo and produced countless sketches and diagrams. In his essay, What is Modernology?, he described his method as a kind of archaeology of the present. Wajiro Kohn, and in a sense his intellectual heir Akasegawa, can be seen as precursors and pioneers of an intellectual movement that gained traction in the West during the 1970s and 80s, the so-called material turn. This refers to the shift in the humanities and social sciences from purely theoretical focus to an emphasis on the materiality of everyday life. Suddenly, different questions moved into the foreground. To what extent is our knowledge not only found in texts, but also embedded in objects, tools, and everyday aids? What can these things tell us about society and its structures?
La pratique culturelle, c'est l'ensemble des pratiques telles que la fréquentation du musée, la fréquentation du concert, la fréquentation du théâtre, la fréquentation du cinéma, etc. Et on donne le nom de pratique culturelle à l'ensemble de ces conduites.
Much like Wajiro Kohn, the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, for instance, attempted in his main work Distinction to identify class differences based on people's habitus. This habitus is reflected in styles of clothing, gestures, preferences for particular products or sports, and many other small aspects of daily life. Out of the material turn emerged the field of science and technology studies, a discipline that explores how knowledge is produced in various cultural and historical contexts, how it is embedded in artifacts and architecture, and how these artifacts in turn affect people. One of the most prominent theories in this field is actor network theory. It begins with the observation that human life can no longer be separated from the machines and devices that surround it. The aim is to include people's interactions with the material world in social analysis. This approach links actor network theory with Japanese Modernology. The intellectual kinship may be one reason why its concepts apply so seamlessly to Thomassons. ANT, short for actor network theory, commits, in the eyes of many sociologists, a kind of sacrilege. It assigns a role in the social sphere to non-human things as actors. Cars, dishwashers, and guardrails, for example, can have a real impact on the social fabric and help shape societal processes. The theory seeks to navigate between two extremes: technological determinism and social determinism. It is not the case that technology alone governs the reality of the social world, that humans have become mere slaves to new technologies, or that unruly technology is the true hidden actor. But the opposite isn't true either, that humans simply operate machines like mindless tools, that they reign over a passive technology, or that only humans can be considered actors. Instead, there are actor networks in which multiple human and non-human actors mutually influence and prompt each other to act. For theorists like Bruno Latour, a person with a firearm is an example of such an actor network. Neither the weapon nor the person alone is the actor. Only together do they form something new. In one essay, Latour illustrates the interplay of human and non-human actors through the sociology of a door closer. He starts with a common problem that while doors offer a handy, resealable hole in walls, people often forget to close them after use. If you're not careful, the door stays open and heat escapes or unwanted people can enter.
The door must be closed!
In large hotels, this problem was often solved by assigning the task of opening and closing the door to a person, who was therefore called a doorman, concierge, or valet. But with a certain level of technological advancement, it became possible to replace the human door closer with a non-human one, a spring mechanism that automatically closes the door, even if the person walking through forgets to do it. Another possibility is the revolving door. It's always closed and it makes people use its specific mechanism. Latour's point is this: the objects and devices in our environment shape how we interact with them. They form an actor network with us. Another way of describing this relationship involves the term script. It was introduced by sociologist Madeleine Ekridge, who uses it to express the idea that certain objects are inscribed with an interaction pattern involving a human actor. The person who designs, conceptualizes, or commissions the production of an object carries out an inscription in the process. This person essentially designs the action program that unfolds when the object is used. Like a movie script, technical objects define the framework for action, along with the actors and the space in which they are supposed to act. Take, for example, the Berlin push-through key. The goal of this key is to ensure that tenants in large apartment buildings always lock the front door. To achieve that, Berlin locksmith Johann Schweiger invented a key in the early 20th century with two identical key bits. Users are forced to lock the door because the key must be pushed through the lock and retrieved from the other side after locking. Whoever wants to use this special kind of key has to follow its script. So what does the actor network theory with its scripts and door closers have to do with Thomassons? Quite simply, Thomassons are perfect teaching examples for this theory, because they show what happens when a script no longer works, when it has been overwritten by a new one. This staircase once followed the script, lead people from street level to the entrance door. But since the entrance no longer exists, because its partner actor, the door, has disappeared, the script of the stairs has become meaningless. Another staircase once led up through an opening in the ceiling. Now that the ceiling opening is sealed, the staircase's program of action is obsolete. This archway is missing the hole in the wall it once spanned, just like this window frame. And this bridge no longer crosses the canal that once flowed beneath it. In the new actor network, they are no longer needed, and yet removing them is too much effort. So all they do now is silently testify to how things once were, what script once operated here. In late antiquity and the Middle Ages, people would sometimes scrape texts from parchment or papyrus to reuse the rare material. Often, the old text would still shimmer faintly beneath the new one. Two texts, readable at once. Thomassons are like that old text, faintly shining through the new one, bearing witness to a time when things were different.